The polls are open in the New York City mayoral primary. Socialist candidate Zohran Mamdani, he proposes to open grocery stores owned and operated by the government. Here with me now is John Katzimatidis. He is the owner of a very unknown grocery chain. It's called Gristedes. And John, I want to know what you think a government-run grocery store would look like.
Well, it didn't work in Moscow.
True.
When I growing up, I learned one thing. Don't fight City Hall. So if City Hall is running the grocery stores, let them run it. You know, don't arrest anybody, give it away for free, and let the people eat.
You're not going to close down Gristedes.
Well, I'm not going to fight City Hall.
But you're not going to close it down.
Well, you never know.
That's your, come on, that's your
You never
chain.
know.
I mean, it's a threat, but you're not going to do it.
Listen, let me say something. The toughest business, we have a lot of companies. We have 7, 8, 10 companies. And if my son is taking over, and guess what? The toughest company we have is retail food. So, do I want my son to suffer?
But you want him to inherit the grocery store chain that
No,
you bought.
let him inherit the oil company who's doing very well. Let him inherit, our real estate company is doing very well. And let him inherit our investment company is doing very well. But
Okay. Look,
I did it. 54 years I did it. My time is up.
Right. Mamdani, he's a socialist.
Yes.
If he wins, what does that do to New York? Because he's going to tax
It's gonna hurt New
tax
York.
corporations. He's going to free bus rides, for heaven's sake.
It's going to hurt New York. I would say a lot of the capitalists, a lot of the business people say, I don't want to fight City Hall. So, Florida, here I come.
Okay. Now, you're in a variety of businesses, including the oil business.
Yes.
You got it right yesterday. You suggested that the price of oil was going to drop big time. You can't close the Strait of Hormuz, and we got this ceasefire. Okay, we're at $65 a barrel now for oil. Good news as far as the consumer's concerned. How low is it going to go? I
think the variable will be anywhere between 55 and 65, probably 60, 61. I said yesterday that if we work well with the Canadian government, which they want to work with us, I met with the Minister of Energy last week of Ontario, and guess what? We're a powerhouse. North America is a powerhouse. We got more energy than the rest of the world put together. And in putting together more pipelines from Canada, from Alaska, and developing our own resources. Let America win again.
Good for the economy? Good for
Absolutely
the consumer?
Good for the economy. I predict, by the end of the year, you're going to have that Dow Jones average closer to 50 because everything is going our way.
Excuse me, 50,000?
Closer to 50,
it's
yes.
50, it's 42 right now.
No, it was 45 a couple months ago.
That was a wild suggestion, John, and you know it.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. I think people will have the thing that's hurting the economy right now. Powell. Interest rates deserve to be lower. He is doing the same thing the federal judges are doing. They're attacking. Some of the Democratic federal judges are having the White House under attack. It has to go to the appeals court, has to go to the Supreme Court to get it reversed. And you can't have the other side of government fighting the President of the United States.
So rates down, no to the socialists, and you're not going to get out of Gristedes. John Katzimatidis, I don't care what you say. You're all right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now, my first guest here has been an ardent supporter of Jay Powell, at least his efforts, until last Wednesday, when in this studio, she called the FOMC decision mean-spirited. I want to bring in QI Research CEO and Chief Strategist Daniel DiMartino Booth. So, this morning we had consumer confidence. It came in below consensus. Both President and expectations saw declines. Philly Fed manufacturing report saw a massive decline. When you see these sort of things, and Powell, this first thing he said to Congress this morning was that the economy is strong. Is he out of touch?
Well, good afternoon, Charles. And I think it's patently apparent, especially on the day that we see expectations in Conference Board consumer sentiment come in at levels that were right there in 2008 when the U.S. economy was already in recession. Americans have said for 6 months in a row that the job market is weakening when they're queried by the Conference Board. And yes, it is quite clear. I love the segment that you just played. Do the job, Jay Powell. Do your job. And put your listening ears on and pay attention to what Americans are telling you in no uncertain terms. That is, make monetary policy in the public interest. It's your job. Do it.
Case Shiller also out, down 0.4%. The Street thought it would be fractionally higher. And the question on that is how possible, or is it possible, that housing deflation could offset any sort of assumptions or higher goods inflation?
Well, Charles, that is the largest single input into inflation metrics. And so, yes, of course, it is telling us it took a long time for the increase in home prices, the increase in rents to show up in the CPI. But now it's actually going to be the largest drag on inflation going into the second half of 2025 and in 2026. And yes, of course, it's going to be larger than anything that we see when it comes to goods inflation, because we still haven't seen any of that come through in tariffs. What we're instead hearing is company CEOs and CFOs saying that they're having to deal with a margin squeeze because they're not able to pass along higher costs to Americans who, by the way, did I mention, for 6 months in a row, they've been saying the job market is weakening.
Yeah. Hey, I have to then ask, right, because Powell seems very comfortable in his position. He keeps, he seems like, okay, I've got my feet up. We've got the leisure or the ability to relax. Explain to the audience the risk if the Fed waits too long. If they do wait too long to cut rates, then what is the risk?
The risk, Charles, is they're going to fall so far behind the curve that they're going to have to come in and be a reactive instead of a proactive Fed and slash interest rates, which would be seen by the public, and rightly so, as being an act of panic. I'd rather have the Fed be on top of what is happening in the economy today than to be trying to ride through on the back end with really large rate cuts. These are individuals who are supposed to be in leadership positions shepherding the U.S. economy. It is time for him to do his job.
It is. Danielle, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Charles.
All right, see you soon.
President Trump is saying there is great unity in the Republican Party after the strike on Iran. Florida Congressman Byron Donalds joins me now. Congressman, is there any kind of split? We've heard talk of this, that there's a split inside the MAGA movement. Is there a split?
I mean, look, you have some members of the movement who are not happy, but let's just be realistic about where we are. We could not let Iran get a nuclear device. They were enriching uranium upwards of 60% and higher. That is a fact. And then the last piece is that there was a strategic opportunity to eliminate their enrichment facilities, and we did that. We obliterated them. And so at the end of the day, you have a terrorist regime in Iran. They have killed American troops. They have fomented terror through the Middle East and around the globe. We have been trying to negotiate in good faith. President Trump tried to negotiate in good faith. But the Iranians were doing what they've been doing really for the last 25 years. And so at this point, we weren't going to follow the lead of Barack Obama or Joe Biden. We were really going to do something serious about this. The opportunity presented itself, and the president of the United States made the correct decision in obliterating those nuclear facilities.
AOC is calling for Trump to be impeached. That's really highly unlikely, isn't it, Congressman?
Oh, my gosh. I mean, again, with her. So stupid, so ridiculous. All this is just, trying to say something to get on TV or have a soundbite that gets carried in media. The Democrats didn't say anything when Barack Obama launched airstrikes against Libya. When Barack Obama launched airstrikes against Syria, they did nothing. They were quiet. They cheered him on, so on and so forth. The president of the United States does have constitutional authority for strikes when it comes to military force. That's why they're the commander in chief. And so a lot of colleagues on Capitol Hill, they're talking about the War Powers Act. But the War Powers Act is something that's been litigated in court time and time again. and it does not obstruct a president of the United States from using military assets when they are in the key national interest. And I will add, one of the things that is crystal clear is that the Iranians were trying to actually create nuclear weapons. There's a reason why they have a ballistic missiles weapon systems. There's a reason why they were trying to create ICBMs. And that was simply not to just have things they can light off as fireworks in the sky above the skies of Tehran. They wanted it to be able to flex their power in that region and around the globe. And since they are a terror factory, that is a fact, we simply could not let that happen.
One more for you, Congressman. The deadline, as you know, for the big, beautiful bill coming up, it's July the 4th. Does the Iran strike help or hurt that timetable?
No, two different things, totally. I think Congress right now, we have to demonstrate that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think the key thing around one big, beautiful bill are going to be the differences between House and Senate. I think where we are right now, unless the Senate moves pretty quickly this week to pass major provisions of the bill, this could actually go to conference and get resolved. So we may not hit July 4th, but I think we'll get it done pretty quickly, all things being equal.
Got it. Congressman, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for being with us on a very important day. We like that. Thank you, sir.
Moments ago, a senior Israeli official telling Fox, quote, unfortunately, the Iranians have decided to continue to fire toward Israel. 2 missiles were fired toward Israel, and we believe they are trying to fire more in the next couple of hours. Now we will have to retaliate. This will happen, of course. It could end within several hours, but the Iranians, need to make a decision. Joining me now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with me. General, thanks so much for being here. Your reaction to all of this?
Yeah, Maria, well, thank you. Well, just a couple things on the immediate tactical situation. Ceasefires are challenging for regimes to get into effect. We've seen it time and time again. An administration makes a decision, and it still takes time to filter down to every person who's got a finger on the trigger here. So we got to find out what this really is. And the Israelis know where those launchers came from. They came from inside Iran. I don't think it has anything to do with proxies. It looks like they were shooting at mobile launchers that fired these missiles. So I think Israel has every right to retaliate, and retaliate strongly here, to make sure there's no other ceasefires. If we get subsequent fires from Iran, then that indicates that for sure they're blowing off the ceasefire. As of right now, I don't think we should take that at face value, assume that there may have been some problems with executing the ceasefire internally in Iran. But if they continue, as I said, then truly they're violating the ceasefire and have no intention to abide by it. But listen, Maria, the bigger picture here is what has been accomplished in these 12 days. If we look back, Iran was 2 weeks from weaponizing 9 or 10 nuclear weapons whenever they made that decision. And Israel came to the point that that's absolutely intolerable. We can't accept that degree of risk. They could put that bomb, they're not ready to put it on a missile, but they could put it in a truck, they could put it in a shipping container. We can't afford to have this. And so where are we? It looks like the nuclear program is set back a number of years for sure. We don't know exactly that. It'll take more assessments to determine it. The sites that we hit, the 3 of them, are somewhere between severely damaged or completely destroyed. Updated BDA will confirm the reality of that. Their ballistic missile program is almost off the table. They still have some capabilities, but where they started from, it is incredible the amount of destruction that Israel has caused. Their military was weak to begin with, and it can still be more weak. And I believe Iran, politically, the regime internally in the country, is significantly weakened as a result of it. There's a tremendous achievement here that the Israelis had, and the United States came in there to help them finish it. And it's been very decisive in doing that. So going forward, here's what we got to keep in mind. This regime is not going to change, Maria. Let's assume the ceasefire holds. Let's assume we want to go to some kind of negotiations. This regime I make a commitment now. They will, in fact, try to recover their nuclear program and rebuild it.
Yeah.
And the Israelis have every right, when they see that happening, even though there's a ceasefire, They have got to be able to counter that. They have a ceasefire right now with Hezbollah, Maria. And Hezbollah has tried to increase their missiles in the south of the Litani River, close to where the Israelis are, increase their military capability. Hear me. Israel has, despite the ceasefire, Israel has conducted over 500 strikes against Hezbollah in attempting to renew their military capacity in the south so they can once again strike Israel, despite the ceasefire. We have got to make certain that the Israelis maintain that capability. When they see Iran rebuilding and recovering that nuclear program, they have every right to go after that and hit it. And that has got to be understood. The administration should support them on that. If we can get a deal that takes Iran completely off the table with a nuclear program, no enrichment, no centrifuges, and we can guarantee that they're not going to do something at a secret site. But if there is something going on at a secret site, or there is recovering and rebuilding of the current program, Israel has every right to counter that with a strike. And that's just the reality of what we're dealing with. This regime is not changing, Maria.
Well, look, I mean, people didn't think that we would ever see some common interests with Syria. And now we're seeing Syria really try to align or appear aligned with the United States. Is there no way to really trust that a ceasefire can take place unless we see regime change in Iran? So is that what it's going to take? Because we really were optimistic that President Trump's brokering of this peace agreement would be long-lasting. And then you had this hours into it. Is it all about this regime in Iran?
Yeah, it is. But listen, the ceasefire, we're going to find out 24, 48 hours whether Iran is really committed to this, or was this just a challenge in execution of the ceasefire, which I think is likely the issue. But the real issue is here, and let me point it out to you again, is they're going to attempt to recover and rebuild their nuclear program. And when Israel has evidence of that, they should be able to counter that.
Yeah.
We can't get back to where we were 2 weeks out from having 9 or 10 nuclear weapons. That's an absurdity. And there's been enormous sacrifice here made on the part of the Israeli people and also the innocent Iranian people who are not involved in this regime, but they got caught up in what happens in war. Civilians always suffer some consequences in war. So the sacrifices have been made here, and we've got to be determined that we're not going to squander those sacrifices by not being vigilant and staying on top of this regime. This regime is not going to change. Hopefully someone else takes over in Iran, and that's what the president wants, that's what Israel wants, and certainly 80% of the people in Iran want that. But that remains to be seen if that's going to happen.
Well, I mean, and it's got to be somebody other than a hand-chosen pick of Khomeini. But I want to get your take on the others, sort of on the outskirts here. I mean, first of all, Russia. Putin is meeting with the foreign minister of Iran yesterday in Moscow, condemning or claiming to condemn the U.S. strikes on key Iranian nuclear sites, saying it was unprovoked aggression. Putin pledged to help the Iranian people, but he didn't specify how. Of course, earlier this year, Russia signed a 20-year strategic partnership with Tehran, though it doesn't contain a mutual defense clause. The Wall Street Journal this morning writes why Russia is giving Iran the cold shoulder after Israel attack, writing, quote, Putin is prioritizing Russia's interests, such as avoiding escalation and maintaining ties with Israel and President Trump over fully backing Iran. So Russia is trying to at least appear strategic. Then you've got President Trump going to the NATO summit today. He'll be meeting with, those 9 countries, our NATO partners. What do you want to hear from them? And what would you expect as we await President Trump to get on Air Force One and get going there? But also your thoughts on Putin. And is he complicit in all of this?
Well, I think this is just bluster on the part of Medvedev and Putin themselves. Listen, Maria, in October, Israel took down Russia's advanced air defense systems in Iran, all of them, the S-300s and the S-400s. Iran, they asked Russia to replace them. We don't know that for a fact, but let's make that assumption.
Yeah.
How many did Russia give them? None. What else did they give them as it became obvious that Israel was getting closer and closer and closer to doing something about Iran after they had finished off all the proxies. Russia provided no material support whatsoever, nothing. China provided no material support. They got thousands of ballistic missiles they could have provided.
It's an important note.
No help whatsoever, no help with air defense. This is a fracture in the Axis alliance that's been established, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, because Russia and China did not come to their aid. This rhetoric we're hearing now, bluster, and it's empty. I think President Trump going into NATO already has leverage. 5% is what they're shooting for in terms of defense, but he has leverage and wind at his back to make certain and put more pressure on Russia to bring them to the negotiating table. Commit that we will assist Ukraine. Commit that we'll sanction Russia. And I think we'll see Mr. Putin showing up at the negotiating table. The wind is at our back now as a result of the strong action the United States took here.
And President Trump's strong action has had implications across the world, including what you just said, Russia's ability or willingness to continue that war in Ukraine. We're going to be watching it all and speaking with you along the way. General, thank you. Good to see you, sir.
Joining us now, Fox News contributor, former CIA station chief, Dan Hoffman. Dan, great to see you. Let me correct myself. What we know is we don't know where the enriched uranium is, but what we understand is there's been major destruction to the centrifuges and the enrichment facilities at particularly Natanz and Fordo. I digress. What's Putin up to, Dan?
Rhetorical brinkmanship, and I just have to tell you, I really enjoyed the president's response there, clapping back at Medvedev and putting him in his place and emphasizing, Putin is the boss. I'll tell you, my older son was looking at that. He said, that's like the president saying, "Slow your roll, Dima." It was a great way to emphasize the seriousness of nuclear weapons. That's a massive violation of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. But the president, the way he responded was precisely the right tone. And it's really humiliating for Russia to be out of the Middle East. Vladimir Putin used to like to say that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the last century. The hallmark of the Soviet Union was its influence in the Middle East. Putin went back to the Middle East. The first time Russia deployed their military assets outside of country was to Syria in 2015 to prop up Assad. And now Russia has no influence whatsoever. Their strategic partnership with Iran, just signed this year, doesn't really amount to a whole lot. And the president's right. Let's focus on Russia's barbaric invasion of Ukraine. That was a wonderful way to sum it up.
Dan, a few things about that post from Medvedev that he put out publicly. He admitted, sort of an admission against interest, that actually the Iran nuclear program was for weapons. He's like, well, we can just say that openly now, which would be a smackdown of some of the denialists who keep trying to pretend that this was all peaceful. Obviously, it's not. So he admitted that. But he did at least hint at the possibility of someone giving nukes, providing nuclear weapons to the Iranian regime in the future. You said it's brinksmanship. Is it also a bluff? Because what regime, what government, Russia, China, anyone, who wants the mullahs to have nukes ultimately at the end of the day? Anyone that has them?
Right. Well, look, Russia and Iran are actually long-term strategic competitors. And Russia's been very wary of providing Iran the material that Iran wants. Iran had a long list of military equipment, fighter aircraft, and other things that they've asked Russia to provide, and the Russians haven't done that. The Russians did build their nuclear power plant for civilian use at Bushehr, but the Russians have been pretty wary about any further assistance to Iran. And look, we saw what the Israelis did to Russian air defense. That didn't work out too well for the Iranians either. This is demonstrating that the best way to break up this axis of dictatorships is to win, which is what the president is doing. Now, I am concerned about North Korea. They were the ones that helped build the nuclear power plant in Syria that Israel destroyed in 2007. And they've assisted Iran with ballistic missiles. So you've always got to be worried about the little rocket man and what he might be up to. But I think what Medvedev was doing was, again, just the same sort of rhetorical brinkmanship we have from Vladimir Putin. That's about all they've got left are these words. Not to say they can't be a thorn in our side, but this isn't a good look for them.
I worry about what Putin and Russia might do to drive up the price of oil. We didn't see the Strait of Hormuz be closed by Iran because that would piss off China and cut off its flow of oil to its greatest customer. But, you know, you drive up the price of oil and keep it flowing, that benefits Russia and Iran. Dan Hoffman, good to see you.
You too, as always.
Me now, my mentor on all this, General Jack Keane, Fox News strategic analyst, retired four-star general. General Keane, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here with you, Larry.
Let's see. The so-called attack on Qatar, UD'd, if I'm pronouncing it right, on our military base in Qatar. People say the Iranians may have signaled us in advance they were going to do it. It wasn't very many strikes. I don't know what it was. I was hoping you would tell us. What does all this mean?
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty significant, and now we have an answer. It's a limited symbolic attack, pretty similar to what they did post-Qasem Soleimani, who we killed. They put 16 to 20 missiles into Iraq and two bases there. And I think it's a version, and they use American slang, of crying uncle. I mean, that's what this really is. They want this over with the United States. They are going to continue to fight against Israel, but they do not want to take on the United States for all the obvious reasons. They could have conducted an unrestrained, consequential attack on U.S. bases, tried to overwhelm our air defense systems, may have had some success with that, killed and wounded some people in the doing of that, maybe hit Arab oil fields again like they did in 2019. All of that was possible. What did they do? A limited symbolic attack. Why? They had to do something because it's a fact that Iran has been significantly humiliated here. The Israelis took down all 70 of their air defense batteries. Over 50-something military sites have been taken down. They hit every single one of their 12-plus nuclear enterprise out there, which was designed with redundancy and resiliency to absorb an attack. That's why he never went to the negotiating table and said, here's my nuclear enterprise, I'm willing to dismantle it and have you come in and inspect that. They always believed they could survive an attack. And that's what they did here. And then the United States got into it because the Israelis were being challenged by 3 sites, and we've assisted them. So I think the results will be somewhere between significantly damaged and completely destroyed will likely be the answer and set this program back for years. It'll take some more analysis to determine how much or if anything else needs to be done. That remains to be seen. But what a blow to the Iranians. And to get, just to add on to your monologue, which I think is truly outstanding here, we are on the cusp of major strategic change. And we haven't seen this in 45 years. And these guys have been killing us for all of those 45 years. And I think some retribution here for the United States as well. And I know I feel it emotionally myself because we had so many hundreds, actually thousands, of Americans killed as a result of this regime. And now strategic change is coming. We have an opportunity here for this regime to end their malign and aggressive behavior that they've been displaying to dominate and control the Middle East, drive the United States out of the region. Didn't happen. We stayed because of them. Destroy the state of Israel, which obviously was on the table. That's what the nuclear weapons were all about. So what happened as a result of this, in my view, you mentioned it, their proxies, who they funded, billions of dollars.
That's the thing.
They haven't fired a shot to defend them.
These are the Sherlock Holmes dogs that didn't bark. It's remarkable to me. We haven't heard a word.
Hezbollah was funded with billions of dollars. They made them into a military organization. They're the most capable terrorist organization that had ever been created, exceeded Al-Qaeda by far. 150,000 rockets and missiles. They were the ground force in Syria, tens of thousands of them, propped up the Assad regime. When they left, Assad regime falls. They have not fired a shot to defend Iran, and that's why they were organized. I asked an Israeli general, what is going on? Do they have any missiles left? He says, General, they've got a few thousand missiles left. And I said, so what is it? He says, there is no will
to fight.
Right.
Because they see the end in sight of Iran. What are they going to go out there and die for if Iran's not going to be able to survive this?
Didn't hear anything from the Gulf states either, from the Sunni Gulf states either.
Opposing.
Not much opposing at all.
So
only the stupid UN.
Strategic change is coming here.
Wait, can they? Yes, okay, I'm with you. I'm hopeful. Can total historical change occur as long as the mullahs and the theocrats and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard are still in power?
I don't see how that's possible. They are so diabolic, theocracy committed to the destruction of Israel and to domination of the region and using brutality and barbarism to achieve all of that. I think that's in their DNA, so to speak, and there'll have to be some kind of change to take that place. I'm not certain the first change that will come from the people. I think it may come from people who also have guns, you know, who can, who have maybe military leaders.
Regular army? Some people say
military
regular
leaders
army.
who want to push these guys aside and hopefully not as a repressive regime, because they want to be able to get economic assistance to grow their country a little bit. But at some point, I do think the people will have a vote here.
This is far-fetched, General Keane, sir. But, you know, I go back, I worked for Reagan when I was a kid, and I watched the Lech Walesa Solidarity movement. It was a labor market movement that began to overthrow Soviet communism. And Reagan gave him all the help we could possibly give him, you know? Some of it was extra legislative help. And it wound up working, had a big influence. And eventually Soviet communism came down and the walls came down and so forth and so on. I'm kind of looking for a Lech Walesa here, or I'm looking for a popular movement here in Iran. For all the reasons you said, I mean, it's just as long as these Revolutionary Guard thugs and their paramilitaries and their secret police and Lord knows what, as long as they're around, I don't think that Iran can become whole again, you know, and there is a potential for greatness in Iran. I think you would agree.
They always have been.
As long as this layer is gone.
You know, they're very pro-West. They're an educated country. This is not a country like Libya. This is a very educated country, and certainly 80% in all the polling, they want these guys gone.
Yes.
So there is opportunity, not only internal to Iran, but their behavior is going to change as a result of it. I think it'll take a little time, but we have a pathway here to the rest of the Arab states normalizing relationships with Israel, something that we need to get on with. That'll be a major paradigm change, and particularly if we take Iran off the board from their malign and aggressive behavior, that'll be significant and worth everything that has been done here.
Yes, sir.
And give the Israelis a huge amount of credit for what they've been doing.
Yes.
And give the President of the United States the credit for the boldness here and pushing aside the shallow, lazy thinking that this is somehow going to contribute to an expanded regional war or something like occupation and invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. And that has never been
It's the end of appeasement. And I hope I think it's the end of our decline, too, but it's the end of appeasement.
Global leadership returned.
Yeah.
United States of America.
Can I, before we lose you, you're so kind. I know you've been helping the network out all day long. It's a bit of housekeeping, but it's a question that's been popping up. Did Iran, or was Iran able to cart or truck out some of their reserves of enriched uranium before we hit them? Do we know about that yet?
There seems to be some evidence to suggest that. I haven't asked that of our government sources. I try to stay away from them. I do talk to Israelis. And on Wednesday, 16 trucks or so came out of Fordow. But what I've been told by the Israelis, they got a beat on this. They've been observing these sites. I mean, they have air superiority. They own the skies. So whatever moved, they know it moved. And I'm assuming they know where it went. And if it needs to be attacked, they'll attack it. What they're focusing on right now is they're finishing up their ballistic missiles. And you can see they've hardly fired that much at them, and hardly anything is penetrating now. So that stock is running out. They are interesting, to go back to your point. last 24, 48 hours, they've been focusing on security forces and police that repress the people.
Yeah.
They have been killing them.
Can knock them off, right?
Yeah, for all the obvious reasons, to remove that weaponization that has been so dominating the control of this population.
Yeah. I wish them luck on that. It's like we have Churchill 1 and Churchill 2 operating right now. It's pretty rare in history.
It sure
Fabulous
is.
story.
It
General
really
Keane
is.
thing.
It's people look up back at this and say,
Remarkable.
wow, what a remarkable historic moment. And we're right in the middle of it.
Thank you, General Keane. As
Always good seeing
As
you.
always, you've taught me whatever I know about this subject.
Oh, stop.
Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, joins me now. Mr. Ambassador, has this strike changed the Middle East fundamentally?
I think it has in the short term, and the long term will depend upon what happens to the regime in Tehran. Right now, they are much weaker. They are going to be much less capable at launching large-scale threats in the region. Their proxies have already been weakened, the Houthis and Hezbollah. They're going to be less capable of using those. They will try to lash out at striking at American or Israeli interests, but I think they are fundamentally weaker, and I think that does change the dynamic a lot.
And that's a good thing, in my personal opinion, and perhaps yours too, Mr. Ambassador. I think you do think that. Now then, what evidence is there that Iran did actually move nuclear materials from the Fordow operation before the strike? Any evidence for that?
We don't have any evidence. The Iranians have claimed that. It would have been logical. I think they were anticipating that there could be such a strike, so it would be sensible for them to take these materials and disperse them as much as they could. That being said, the ability to take enriched uranium, further enrich it, and then weaponize it is still a very complicated process. You need the facilities to do that, and they are in a much more degraded position, I guess you would say, to be able to do that. We don't know exactly how much damage was done, but it's hard to believe with what we've seen from the satellite photos that they are in a position to really do that right now.
Mr. Ambassador, is it in America's best interests to have regime change in Iran?
Well, you have to look at that two ways. I would say, is it in our interest for the regime to change? Yes, we would love to see a regime in Tehran that represents the Iranian people, that produces freedom, a democratic process, prosperity and security for everybody there. That would be great, and that would be great for America. But whether we should be the agents of doing that, that is a very different question, and that often involves bringing up greater support for the regime in opposition to that American intervention than if we let events take their own course.
Well,
so that's the debate that people are looking at.
Well, as things stand now, do you think there will be regime change in Iran?
Certainly the regime has increased its crackdown on the people. They're arresting people right and left, preventing any demonstrations. That's an indicator that A, they're worried, and B, that people are getting out to protest, so that the regime is having to do this. So certainly the raw material is there. Whether it materializes, we just simply don't know yet.
I wouldn't like to be a nuclear scientist in Iran at this point, but that's, again, my opinion. Ambassador, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
The last thing they want to do is enrich anything right now. They want to recover. And we won't let that happen. Number one, militarily we won't. I think we'll end up having somewhat of a relationship with Iran. I see it. Look, I've had a relationship over the last 4 days. They agreed to the ceasefire.
President Trump discussing Iran this morning as he takes center stage at the NATO summit in the Netherlands. The president touting Operation Midnight Hammer as a major success after reports yesterday claimed it only set back Tehran's nuclear capabilities by a few months. Joining me now is Pennsylvania Congressman Dan Muser, a member of the House Financial Services and Small Business Committees. Congressman, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I mean, no doubt we saw what happened in terms of the huge success and the decoys and the no leaks in terms of the White House's action and the commander-in-chief directing our military. How would you assess the operation?
Well, I agree with you. It was a complete success, without question. Our intent was to destroy, set back, if you will, Iran's, the terrorist state of the world's nuclear capabilities, and that was done. You know, sadly, there was some leak from a rogue individual at the Pentagon, and the media picks up on it, trying to give Iran the benefit of the doubt. Look, their nuclear capabilities were annihilated. That was the intent. the last 3 or 4 presidents said they were going to, had concerns about their nuclear development, uranium enrichment. I've been to the International Atomic Energy Agency. They had concerns during the Biden administration, significant factually based concerns, and the president took care of business. President Trump set them back, so it's no longer a threat.
Well, you're right. Oh, there's so many presidents. We've got their quotes. George Bush, Iran must not be allowed to develop nuclear weapons. Barack Obama, I've stated that Iran will never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. Joe Biden, we will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Then you've got Donald Trump. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. And so Donald Trump did something about it. But look, I want to get your take on business here because the Senate is working to get the big, beautiful bill across the finish line. You've got only 1 legislative week left to get this on the president's desk by what he's expecting to be July 4th deadline. The president posted on Truth Social yesterday, to my friends in the Senate, lock yourself in a room if you must. Don't go home and get the deal done this week. No one goes on vacation until it's done. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also weighed in on the SALT deduction yesterday to Fox. Here's what he said. Watch.
What's the biggest holdup with SALT? The fact that there seems to be an inconsistency on the Republican position in the House and then the Senate.
I think that both sides are working through, and we'll have a solution to that next 24, 48 hours. I would just add, had a very successful lunch meeting with the senators. I think that we are on track for hopefully for a vote this Friday for July 4th for the tax bill. President is doing peace deals, tax deals, trade deals, so he's done a peace deal. I think we'd have the tax deal done by July 4th, and then we can finish with the trade deals.
So what do you think, Congressman? What are you expecting this to look like when you get it back in the House? A lot of revisions for the Senate?
Well, I tend to agree with Secretary Bessent. I think he's doing a great job. And as a matter of fact, I think we will have the Senate bill be able to be passed on the House floor by Saturday. There's only a couple of provisions. I mean, one, of course, the SALT. That's being worked out with income thresholds. And then a subsidy, if you will, for rural hospitals, which will make up for perhaps some of the federal ratios for Medicaid, but they will be supplemented to satisfy the hospital needs. So, yeah, I think we're going to have something Saturday morning, Maria, and then we should be done here for a few days. So but we shall see.
You think you're going to get something Saturday morning, this Saturday, or are you talking about Saturday, July 4th weekend?
I mean this Saturday, could be Sunday, sometime this weekend. We should get the Senate bill, and we'll debate it some, but I think it'll be acceptable to our vast majority, with the exception of 1 or 2.
And 1 or 2, does that include New Yorkers or Californians who are worried about the SALT deduction? Do you think you're going to get the SALT cap to a level that Mike Lawler can vote for?
I do. We have to. This bill is so important to my constituents. I mean, it's $4,000 in tax increases will occur. Small businesses will be annihilated. We won't codify the border security and border control that the president has delivered.
Yeah.
Energy would be set back. Look, we're in pro-growth mode, and this bill is a big step in the right direction. It's not the end. It's the beginning, as I've been saying very often, and that leads into the Jerome Powell situation, with him not working on the interest rates. He's got to be part of what's being built here, and that's an American movement of pro-growth, of American manufacturing, of success, and for more foreign trade. That's the whole idea here, and this bill is a big step in that direction.
Well, I'll tell you, so much is riding on this. It's not just, what you said, small business, it's big business as well. I spoke with the chairman and CEO of Bank of America yesterday, Brian Moynihan. Here's what he said. Watch. Your thoughts on what do you want to see in terms of policy in this big, beautiful bill that will be important to accelerate growth for your sector and the broad economy?
I think the number one thing is to actually extend the tax rates, because what people are losing the context is these tax rates were meant to get the U.S. competitive on taxes for corporations so that they weren't remember back to people were exporting business outside the United States for lower tax rate reasons.
Is this a front center issue? Getting those tax rates extended, ensuring they get this bill over the finish line?
Well, the assumption they'll be extended so much, though, that if it didn't get extended, it would be a real shock to the system, and that's what everybody's working to avoid. On the debt, the interesting thing is that debt is more of a front and center topic in America today. I'd say that the taxes really, everybody's assuming to get through, it would be a real shock to the system. They don't.
So a shock to the system means if this doesn't happen, we could see the markets go down. I mean, Jay Powell was on Capitol Hill yesterday, and he's on again today, as you know. He will testify before the Senate Banking Committee. But what was your sense of what Jay Powell said to the House yesterday, in fact, saying he's not rushing to cut rates right now, tracking a wave of potential price hikes and waiting for more clarity before making a move, Congressman?
Yeah, once again, he's really just not on board. He's not embracing what's going to be done here. And what Moynihan was talking about was bonus depreciation. It was the enhanced 199A. It was things that will regulatory reforms that will help banking, which we're passing. And Jerome Powell yesterday is just slow handing it and anticipating what shouldn't be anticipated, and that's some sort of inflationary increase which hasn't occurred due to tariffs. You know, we only import 14% of our GDP. There are alternatives to any increase in pricing that could take place. So, a 1% reduction, Maria, in interest rate, and we're at 4.5 basically right now. You know, we were at 2.5 a couple of years ago. That seemed to be the norm. If we could bring it down a half a point or even 1 point, we save on our national debt, on our service on debt, $200 billion, and it will add $290 billion to our GDP. Yeah. So it just makes sense. We're in investment mode. We're in growth mode. And Powell's blaming it on the wrong things.
Yeah, and I know that's why President Trump has been, prodding the chairman to cut rates. It's largely because of the debt. But Congressman, real quick before you go, your state is a big energy state. When are we going to see the president's energy agenda in terms of permitting, et cetera, tapping into the capacity in America really play out? Is that a second half of the year priority?
Well, it is part of the reconciliation, is part of the BBB. Okay. We're all working on it. And you know what? Our governor of Pennsylvania drags his feet when it comes to our natural resources as well. So maybe we need a new governor as well. But thanks, Maria. You're the best.
Good to see you, Congressman. Thank you so much. Dan Muser.
I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload. And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong. But in all fairness, Israel unloaded a lot. And now I hear Israel just went out because they felt it was violated by one rocket that didn't land anywhere. That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either. I think they both violated it. I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all.
There's President Trump on his way to NATO just in the last hour before leaving Washington for the NATO summit. He said both Israel and Iran violated the ceasefire that he brokered yesterday. The president had a busy morning on Truth Social, posting this: Israel is not going to attack Iran. All planes will turn around and head home, while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Nobody will be hurt. The ceasefire is in effect. The president brokering ceasefire and peace in the Middle East yesterday. Joining me now is Texas Senator Ted Cruz, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees. Senator, it's great to see you again. Thanks so much for being here this morning. Assess the president's leadership on all of this and what has taken place. How do you see things?
Well, I think President Trump's leadership has been extraordinary. It has been clear-eyed. He has stood unshakably alongside our friend and ally, the State of Israel, and he acted decisively this weekend to take out Iran's nuclear capability. The military attack that our soldiers carried out was incredibly effective. We had 7 B-2 stealth bombers that dropped a total of 14 bunker buster bombs on 3 nuclear facilities, annihilated those nuclear facilities, and made it home safely with no casualties whatsoever. That was clear, that was decisive, And Maria, understand the reason the president ordered that attack was, yes, to stand with Israel, but more fundamentally to protect America. The Ayatollah, when he chants death to America and death to Israel, he means it. The Ayatollah refers to Israel as the little Satan. He refers to America as the great Satan. And there's a reason the Ayatollah has been developing an ICBM program. ICBM, as you know, stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. You don't need an ICBM for Iran to attack Israel. They're relatively close. The purpose of an ICBM, the reason the Ayatollah wants an ICBM, is to be able to detonate a nuclear warhead over an American city and potentially kill millions of Americans. That's why President Trump acted decisively, and I'm proud to stand with the president.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we were afraid of retaliation from Iran, and we were talking about what Iran is capable of at this point. And when I spoke with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, on Sunday, he had a message for China should Iran make a move. Watch this. Do you expect Iran to move to close the Strait of Hormuz to try to disrupt oil transportation across the world?
Well, I encourage the Chinese government in Beijing to call them about that, because they heavily depend on the Straits of Hormuz for their oil. If they do that, it'll be another terrible mistake. It's economic suicide for them if they do it. And we retain options to deal with that. But other countries should be looking at that as well. It would hurt other countries' economies a lot worse than ours. It would be, I think, a massive escalation that would merit a response, not just by us, but from others. We had 3 objectives. We struck those 3 objectives with decisive force. And that was the point of this mission, and that's what we achieved. What happens next will depend on what they do. They want to negotiate, we're ready to negotiate. They want to get cute and do things that are dangerous, we have responses available that are devastating.
So, Senator, what do you want to see happen now? I mean, it seems to me that if, in fact, you and your colleagues and President Trump are able to put the Iranian threat at bay, perhaps the president now can turn attention to focusing on the larger adversary, I think, or equal adversary, and that is Communist China. Tell us how you see foreign policy from here.
Yeah, Maria, both are very serious challenges. The most acute short-term national security risk America faced was the risk of a nuclear Iran, because you have a theocratic lunatic leading that country who was actively trying to develop nuclear weapons, who was close to developing nuclear weapons, and had repeatedly stated his intention to use those weapons and to try to murder as many Americans as possible. That's what President Trump acted decisively this weekend to eliminate that threat. In terms of long-term threats, the biggest geopolitical threat the United States faces over the next century is, as you said, Communist China. And I got to tell you, when I arrived in the Senate 13 years ago, I was saying 13 years ago, China is our greatest adversary, our greatest threat over the next 100 years. And at the time, that was a very lonely view in the United States Senate. Every Democrat disagreed with me, and most of the Republicans disagreed with me. They just looked at China, and they saw nothing but dollar signs as far as the eye can see. I think many more people, their eyes have opened up to the threat of China, and I think we need to have the same sort of comprehensive, serious strategy to counteract and defeat China that we had under Ronald Reagan for the Soviet Union, that won the Cold War, defeated the Soviet Union, and won the Cold War without a shot. And in both instances, let's be clear, in Iran and with China, nobody wants a shooting war where America and China, where our armies are shooting at each other. Just same with Iran. Nobody wants America to invade Iran. That's not what President Trump did. He did a limited targeted bombing strike. But there are lots of tools we can use to counteract China, just like we did with the Soviet Union, short of military conflict. And I believe President Trump is clear-eyed about taking on China, as he should be.
And you've assessed this in a very practical way. I don't understand why your colleagues on the left do not see this. I mean, we're talking about elected officials who have been screaming Russia, Russia, Russia while China was eating our lunch. Now a group of 12 House Democrats who are also, by the way, military veterans. They're supporting a War Powers Act, which would constrain President Trump's military authority. In the middle of this incredible conflict, they want to constrain the president of the free world in response to Operation Midnight Hammer, when the U.S. took out those 3 nuclear sites. You've got Democrats Jim Himes, Gregory Meeks, Adam Smith introducing a war powers resolution to stop U.S. armed forces from hitting Iran, Senator. What are you going to do about it, and how do you see this playing out?
Well, listen, it's going to fail. It's going to be voted down. But I got to say, today's Democrat Party, it's really sad that they don't stand for any policies, any reasonable positions. They're now a party of anger and hate. The number one hate they have is they hate Donald Trump. It is the animating position of Democrats today is hatred of Donald J. Trump. Next, they hate Israel, and the anti-Israel sentiment, the pro-Hamas sentiment in the Democrat Party keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So when Israel is in the midst of war, the Democrats' instinct is, how can we undermine and weaken Israel? And far too many of them, I'm very sorry to say, I believe, hate America. That the same people who are funding Democrats are the people who are funding anti-Semitic protests on college campuses. They're people who are funding riots in Los Angeles and other cities in favor of open borders and allowing more murderers and rapists and Venezuelan gang members into America. And that is an agenda that makes no sense. So the Democrats, they'll have their vote. It'll be voted down. And you can count on, if we need elected leaders to stand up to our enemies, to stand with our friends, to protect Americans, sadly, the Democrats are telling the American people they're not those leaders, and they're going to be on the wrong side of every one of those issues.
That is a sad situation. And by the way, one more reason why you don't have any Democrat support for President Trump's agenda. You have returned to Washington. Your colleagues are back as the clock is ticking down on this July 4th deadline to pass the big, beautiful bill. Tell me where it stands. I know Ron Johnson is very worried about debt and deficits. You've got others like Rand Paul worried about raising the debt ceiling. Will you get this over the finish line, and where are the cuts coming? What will this look like at the end of the Senate briefing?
So listen, we're going to get it done, and the reason we're going to get it done, Maria, is we have to, because it is the principal vehicle through which we can accomplish the president's agenda, through which we can deliver on the mandate that came on Election Day. The American people reelected President Trump, gave us a Republican Senate, a Republican House. Now we've got to deliver. There are a lot of good things in this bill. This bill rebuilds our military. This bill secures the border, funds building the wall, funds more Border Patrol agents, more ICE agents. This bill also cuts taxes on working men and women. It includes, among other things, my legislation on no tax on tips, a terrific policy the president campaigned on. I wrote the law. That's in this bill. This will be the biggest tax cut of a generation, and I hope we see significant spending cuts. We're in the middle of those debates right now. I am with my colleagues who are fighting for more spending cuts. I think we ought to show real fiscal discipline. But where exactly we land, we'll find out this week. But one way or another, we're going to get it done, because failure is not an option. We got to deliver on our promises.
We've got to jump. Senator, will you support a $30,000 SALT cap?
Look, I think the SALT deduction ought to be as low as possible. At the end of the day, we should not be subsidizing blue state Democrats who tax the hell out of their citizens.
You want 10,000.
So I'd like it as low as possible, but that's going to be a negotiation. It's going to be a back and forth between the Senate and the House, and we'll resolve it. It'll be somewhere in a middle ground.
All right, Senator. Great to see you this morning, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, Senator Ted Cruz on Capitol Hill. We'll be right back with Tom Homan. Stay with us.
Joining me now, Trump administration board czar, Mr. Tom Homan, one of my great heroes. Tom Homan, welcome back to the show. Iranian sleeper cells, Mr. Homan. You've got to do something. I mean, some have been arrested so far. How big a problem is this, and what are your plans to lead ICE to deal with it?
Well, look, we got a lot of work to do. You're exactly right. Which, again, I want you to jump right in. We need a big, beautiful bill. We need the funding for more agents. We need the funding for more beds. We need the funding for more transportation. We need the funding for more targeting. So it's imperative, especially right now. So for those on the Hill, I don't care. Removing national security threats, removing public safety threats from this country should be a nonpartisan issue. So get it done. We need the funds to get this done. Well, the good thing is President Trump, we got President Trump in the Oval Office. I can tell you, right after the election, we didn't wait till January. We didn't wait for the inauguration. Right after the election, I got together with a lot of smart folks to say, okay, we got a big problem we're going to deal with right after inauguration on 2 million plus gotaways and all these special interest aliens that were released into the United States. So we started planning for this months ago. So day one of the administration, we're hitting the ground. That's why President Trump from day one said, we're going to concentrate on national security threats and public safety threats, and that's what we're doing. After the Iran issue this weekend, we just stepped on the gas, adding a lot more resources to it and really hammering it. So we're on it. We're going to do the best we can as fast as we can.
One of your messages then, Tom, and this is important because the Senate is coming to a vote. The one big beautiful bill is in part, it's an economic bill, yes, but it's a border security bill, and it's a the criminals bill also. That's a huge part of it. That's what you're saying to us.
Here's what I want to say to them. Under the Biden administration, we have over 2 million known gotaways, captured on video, drone traffic or sensor traffic. 2 million people crossed this border illegally and paid more to get away. They didn't pay less to get a free airline flight to the city of their choice, not get a free hotel room, not get 3 meals a day, not get free medical care. 2 million people paid more not to take advantage of that giveaway program. Why? Because they didn't want to be vetted. They didn't want to be fingerprinted. They didn't want to deal with law enforcement at all. Why is that? That should scare the hell out of everybody. It does me. So how many of these 2 million people are significant public safety threats? How many of them came from the country sponsoring terror? Border Patrol arrested over 400 trying to sneak into the country. They arrested them. So you can't think not a single one of these 2 million plus didn't come here to do us harm. So that's the message. This is not an immigration issue as much. It is a national security issue. Secure border is about national security. And secure border is about interior enforcement. If there's no consequences, then the border enforcement's less. This is what the American people need to know. I think they understand. That's why President Trump's in the White House. They elected him on this issue. So every member of Congress, this is the biggest national security vulnerability this country's ever seen. I've done this since 1984. Help us. Fund the bill and let's get this done.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Great message. Another one, Tom Homan. This new socialist mayor candidate, he hasn't won yet, but he won the Democratic primary, Zohran Mamdani. So he's saying, I mean, this is incredible. He's vowed to kick the, quote, fascist ICE out of New York City, okay? So how do you intend to deal with that? Because I would guess there are going to be a lot of criminals and Iranian cells and whatnot in New York City. The job's not done there. What do you say to this guy?
Good luck with that. Federal law trumps him every day, every hour, every minute. We're going to be in New York City. Matter of fact, because it's a sanctuary city, President Trump made it clear a week and a half ago. We're going to double down and triple down on sanctuary cities. If we can't arrest a bad guy in the county jail, one agent arresting one bad guy, they release him in the streets like New York does every day. We got to send a whole team to look at this guy. And not only that, we're going to send additional teams to look for all the people they arrest. We're going to concentrate in sanctuary cities because we know they're releasing public safety threats and national security threats back to the street. So we know we got a problem there. So we don't have that problem in Florida where most sheriffs work for us. So we're going to just double up and triple up on New York. And not only are we going to send more agents to the neighborhood, we're going to increase worksite enforcement tenfold. If we can't arrest them in the jail, you're going to force them in the neighborhood, then we'll find them in the neighborhood. If we can't find them in the neighborhood, we'll find them at the worksite. So game on, we're coming.
Yes, sir. Game on, we're coming. I love that. Has Eric Adams, the current mayor, been a help to you, sir?
Yes, I met with Eric Adams starting in November, and he wants to do the right thing. Look, he wants to be a law and order mayor. He he spent a career in the police force. He doesn't want to be an immigration officer. I haven't asked him to be an immigration officer, but he wants our cops working with our cops on the significant public safety threats and national security threats. He also wants to help us find, 300,000 missing children that were trafficked in this country, maybe in forced labor trafficking or forced sex trafficking. He wants to help find these kids. Again, he doesn't want to do immigration work, but he wants us to work with his law enforcement officers on removing significant national security threats from his city. It's the right thing to do. It should be a nonpartisan issue. So I work with him. He's trying to help us, but the city council keeps, stopping it and suing him over it. But he's in the right mindset. It's just that his hands are tied in many ways.
Yeah, the other guy's a complete nutcase, but you'll roll him. Anyway, Board Czar Tom Homan, we appreciate seeing you always, Tom Homan. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you.
Welcome back. New this morning, the Trump administration reportedly readying an executive action to boost energy supply, powering AI data centers in a new challenge to China. Meanwhile, the White House confirming that it is speeding up rare earth shipments to the United States. China is, an agreement first discussed months ago in Geneva. Joining me now to tell us all about it and more is the Treasury Secretary of the United States, Scott Bessent. Mr. Secretary, it's always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Morning, Maria. Always good to see you.
So I know the rare earth minerals was a huge improvement after your conversations. Can you tell us about this agreement with China? What exactly does it entail?
Sure. And look, Maria, this is what leadership looks like under President Trump. We've got peace deals, we got trade deals, we got tax deals. And in dealing with the world's second largest economy, we approached each other with mutual respect. President Trump set the table with a very important call with Party Chair Xi. They have a very good relationship. We had trade talks in Geneva toward moving toward the agreement in London. Part of the agreement was tariffs coming down and rare earth magnets starting to flow back to the U.S. They formed the core of a lot of our industrial base. They were not flowing as fast as previously agreed. President Trump and President Xi had a phone call, and then our teams met in London, ironed this out, and I am confident now that we, as agreed, the magnets will flow. In the meantime, we had put countermeasures versus the Chinese in place. We had held back the vital supplies for them. So what we're seeing here is a de-escalation under President Trump's leadership.
Okay. So Western companies said after that Geneva agreement, Western companies said that China was demanding to get sensitive business information to secure the rare earth and magnets. It was raising concerns that China was basically bullying companies. They wanted information, surveillance, and it was a potential misuse of data, exposing trade secrets in exchange for those magnets. Did the Chinese commit to stop doing that?
Well, to be clear, too, Maria, they weren't just doing it to the U.S. They put on a global export license regime, which had never had before, on April 4th, and this really pressured the global industrial base. We have an agreement with them that will make magnets flow to everyone who had received them before on a regular basis. So I think the situation you just described has been remedied.
And of course, this escalation happened after the tariffs were put in place, where President Trump initially put a 145% tariff on Chinese imports. Where does that stand in terms of this upcoming deadline? He put a pause on that, lowering it to 30%. Have those tariffs on Chinese goods changed in any way?
Sure. So, Maria, the initial tariffs on China, let's go back. In February, President Trump put 20% fentanyl tariffs on China. Those remain in place. On April 2nd, China's reciprocal rate was 34%. China was the only country in the world who retaliated against the U.S. We had told countries, don't retaliate, then you can come to us and we can negotiate to bring down tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, talk about currency manipulation, unfair funding of labor and capital. So we ended up in this escalatory spiral where we were at 145, they were at 125. Now our tariffs are at 30 on them. We're at 10. We're collecting substantial tariff income. And, Maria, the important thing to note here is this is the centerpiece of making trade more fair for American workers, for the American people. And this is happening across the entire spectrum with our trading partners. So, in the first 100 days, we set the table for the peace deals, the trade deals, and the tax deals. And now in this 100 days, we're bringing them all home. But this is the centerpiece of fair trade, which is something we haven't seen in the U.S. in 40 years.
Well, that's exactly right. And I always chuckle when the globalists try to attack President Trump's tariff plan by saying that we want free trade, free trade, free trade. What I think they miss is that what President Trump is trying to do is get fair trade, which we haven't seen. So there's free trade, but then there's also fair trade. And that's what President Trump is trying to do. But let me go back to my initial question.
Maria, if I could add one thing, too, is what we've seen, too, is we need to de-risk our trade, because the only good thing that came out of COVID was it was a beta test for what could happen if our supply chains were cut off, which happened during COVID. So now we know that there are strategic industries, semiconductors, medicine, steel, a variety of those. So we need to de-risk on those and then make the rest of trade fairer.
Oh, that's absolutely right, because during COVID, the Chinese propaganda, I think it was Xinhua News, came out with a tweet and said, well, maybe we won't send America the medicines that they need. So we should have learned our lesson back then about supply chains, but nobody moved until President Trump put the fire under corporate America to say, get your supply chains in America. We need to have manufacturing here. But let me get back to my earlier question, because the U.S. tariffs on China are currently involved and subject to this 90-day suspension. It is going to end on August 12th. During this period, the baseline reciprocal tariff, as you just said, of 10% is applied to imports from China instead of the previously higher rate. Where does that stand? Is President Trump going to extend the period beyond August 12th, or are we still talking about a 30% tariff on Chinese imports? And what about the earlier 145%? Has there been any decision on any of that?
Well, I think this is going to be up to the Chinese, that if they want to be good partners and do as they agreed in London, they're forthcoming with the magnets, then I think we can keep this de-escalation under control. We don't want to decouple. As a matter of fact, trade with China can go one of two ways. I talked about the de-risking and the strategic decoupling, but the generalized trade, we can either increase trade with China, they can open up because the trading relationship is so imbalanced, or if they continue this imbalance, China accounts for 30% of the manufacturing in the world, and that's not sustainable. They need to consume more, and we would like to sell more to them, but they can't dump into the world. So we will see if they want to be a responsible partner. My sense is they do. As I mentioned, President Trump, Party Chair Xi, have a very good relationship. So it's very helpful to have the leadership there constantly speaking.
Okay, so no change to that. We're watching China. This is my last question on China, because I want to get to the big, beautiful bill with you, Secretary. But I don't understand how it's possible that we're even talking about economics and doing trade deals with a bad actor. Okay, how is it possible that we're supposed to trust a communist party who actually has 150,000 illegals coming into America through the open border, has been stealing intellectual property for decades? Just the other day, we had 3 or 4 Chinese nationals trying to get a pathogen into America to destroy our crops and cause sickness to Americans, not to mention the fentanyl, not to mention the COVID and the COVID cover-up. So how are we supposed to trust anything Communist China tells us?
Well, look, Maria, it's the old saying, trust but verify, and that's why we have to de-risk. It's one thing in terms of everyday items that are imported. And, they've shown that they weren't a reliable partner during COVID. So President Trump, has signed numerous executive orders that over the next 12, 18, 24 months, we will de-risk and become self-sufficient. And, I can tell you, there's a group of us in the administration, we meet every week. And if we walk out in January 2029 and we have not undertaken this successful de-risking, we will think we have failed, and we are not going to fail. President Trump is on us every week, every day about moving this de-risking forward.
I love that. And thank you for your work on that. This impacts every single American citizen and, by the way, the world. Let me get to Section 899, because this is such an important issue. And you had progress. You asked the Senate and the House to remove Section 899 protective measure from consideration in the big, beautiful bill. You said this understanding with our G7 partners provides greater certainty and stability for the global economy. Tell me why this was so important to you, because I know that we've talked about this many times on this program, and there were lots of investors and corporations who felt that that section of the tax code had unintended consequences and were capturing many, many more people and investors who wanted to invest in the United States than you intended.
Well, Maria, let's talk about how we got here. We got here under a lack of leadership from the Biden administration. The Biden administration wanted to supplicate American business interests to the globalist tax system called Pillar 2. It would have involved substantial loss of revenues to the U.S. Treasury, probably in the tune of $100 billion going to foreign treasuries. When President Trump came in the first few days of the administration, he signed an executive order for Treasury and the administration to undertake to fix this. So our goal the whole time has been to have the existing U.S. tax system sit next to Pillar 2. The goal of Pillar 2 is to establish a global minimum tax. The U.S. tax system does that, but the revenues come into the Treasury. So we were under substantial pressure as a result of Biden administration actions to sort of kowtow to this globalist notion. We pushed back on that. Section 899, great leadership from Senator Crapo, Chairman Jason Smith, who you just had on. 899 was a potential weapon to push back on these unfair taxes. So, you know, it was great leadership, President Trump, Senator Crapo, Chairman Smith. Then I was able to go and approach my G7 counterparts. I'll tell you, my colleague Derek Tyler at Treasury worked the nonstop on this at the working level. So we were able to reach an agreement where the U.S. tax system, our tax sovereignty is now guaranteed. We will sit next to the global system. The money will come in the U.S. Treasury. And again, you know, this is another example of leadership because we had respect from our counterparts. We wouldn't have seen this before.
Yeah, you're right, Secretary. But look, Section 891 of the tax code remains. This is the tax code section that allows President Trump to double the tax bill of foreign companies or individuals whose governments have been found to impose discriminatory or extraterritorial taxes on U.S. citizens or companies. That's an area to watch as well. What about Section 891?
Well, Maria, you know, Section 891's been in the books for 90 years. It's never been used. Okay. You know, everyone came to me and said, you know, oh, the sky is falling, 899. And I said, you know, there's this other provision that's been in there. It's never been used. But, you know, we're not going to give up our tax sovereignty. And I think the good thing here, we were able to work successfully with our partners. And why were we able to do that? Because we came from a position of strength, a position that President Trump put us in, you know, whether it was the, you know, in his military leadership, the trade leadership, and now, you know, I think you're going to want to talk about the tax leadership that we're seeing here. You know, this is just a new way of doing things. It is forceful and transparent, and, you know, great for the American people.
Well, Secretary, that's what happens when you have a businessman at the wheel in the Oval Office, but you've still got SALT, including the pass-through. You've got the IRA green energy credits, SNAP to deal with, all these extras to deal with. Do you expect this to get done as lawmakers work over the weekend, and do you expect this bill to get to the president's desk in July?
Maria, I was at my office with a group of the what's called the SALT Republicans last night, I can tell the voters in their district that they have worked extremely hard for them. We are going to, my sense, we are very close to a deal. It is going to help the voters in their district, but it is going to be fair for the overall American people. It is time for everyone to put away individual interest. President Trump had a great rally yesterday in the East Room. And look, you know, the one big beautiful bill, it is the continuation of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act. We're going to bring back full expensing, which is new, which is really going to provide great impetus to the economy. But it's also going to include President Trump's campaign promises of no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, reduced taxes on seniors, and deductibility of American-made cars. So, you know, it's something in there for everyone. And also there's border security in there. We are going to fix the FAA. So, you know, this is a tremendous bill, and I am confident that everyone working together, Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson, with President Trump's assistants, have been able to move narrow majorities forward, and I think we're going to be able to bring this home. The president will be signing the bill on July 4th.
Secretary, final question here. What is the next country we should expect a trade deal to do with the United States? Are you going to be able to get some deal announcements beyond just the UK before this August deadline, where we're going to hear from the Court of International Appeals?
Maria, you know, with all things, they get done at the end. You have to put on a deadline. You know, as you and I know, nothing gets done in Washington well in advance. So I think a lot of the countries are feeling pressure. As President Trump has said, you know, he's created maximum negotiating leverage for Ambassador Greer, Secretary Lutnick, and myself by saying, like, if you can't get to a deal, he's happy to go back to the April 2nd level. So we have countries approaching us with very good deals. We have 18 important trading partners. You know, UK, China, they are behind us for now. Are behind us. And then Secretary Lutnick said yesterday that he expects 10 more deals. So, you know, if we can ink 10 or 12 of the important 18, you know, there are another important 20 relationships, then I think we could have trade wrapped up by Labor Day. So, you know, we will have taxes and trade, which I think will provide a great stimulus from the economy. And then there's the deregulatory impact.
Well, that's a huge impact. By the way, we will likely need it. I mean, I love the fact that hourly workers' real wages are up 2% in the first 5 months of the president's term, while oil prices are down. But, Secretary, we just got a negative GDP the other day. How worried are you about growth in the second half?
I think we're going to see a substantial acceleration as the three pieces of President Trump's economic agenda kick in: trade, taxes, and deregulation in the second half.
Secretary, great to see you this morning. Thank you, sir.
Good to see you, Maria.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent joining us. We'll be right back with the big 8 a.m. hour. Stay with us.